In this video, I'm going to be making a San-Mai Petty chef's knife. Thanks for tuning in. Here's the San-Mai. It's wrought iron San-Mai, so there's wrought iron on both sides and a high carbon knife steel in the middle. Here I'm lightly tapping at a welding key to make sure that everything is solid before I start forging. And now I'll start forging the profile, keeping an eye out for any splits. This is a laminate with two different materials, so I gotta make sure everything is solid as I forge. This takes a lot of drawing out because I started with such a short, thick billet, so I get all that thickness into length. Here I'm forging in the bevels. This is the taper that leads to the cutting edge. I do most of this during forging, so I don't have to spend as much time with the grinder. After the knife is done being forged, I carefully tap it to straight. I do most of this off camera because it's pretty fiddly, but I'll show you a little bit of it here. Not my cleanest forging, but I should be able to get the knife I want out of it. Here I'm cutting out the shape of the knife. I'm going to take this and glue it to the knife, and then I can grind to the shape. Now on to grinding the profile. I use a 60 grit belt for this just because it's slightly less aggressive and it gives me a little more control. I kept the profile slightly long just because I had the material, so I might as well. Now to even up my bolster. I start on the grinder just to rough off most of the material. And then I'll move the files here. After grinding, I finish off the shapes of the plunges with files. Now on to bevel grinding. I have a scribe line on the blade to grind to, just to make sure I keep it straight as I go. After rough grinding the bevels, I need to deal with a crack that's on both sides of the blade. This is a crack just in the wrought iron, and it has no structural problem with the knife. But I wanted to fill it just to make it look nice, so I chose copper and I'm going to hammer it in after dovetailing it. Here I quick grind off the excess copper. As you can see, the cracks are filled, and it sits flush with the rest of the knife. Here I'm setting up for cutting in the bolster transition. First, I clamp the file guide at one angle. Now I cut away most of the material on the belt grinder. The file guide has carbide faces, and this allows it to not be touched by the belt. And then I have to finish off with a file. Same goes for the other side. It's the same process, except I clamp at a different angle and I cut the other side. The result of cutting in at those two angles is a V shape, as you can see here. Now on to heat treatment. First I heat up the oil by dunking in a red hot bar. This allows the oil to be more viscous and allows it to quench the blade at a faster rate. And into the oil. Trying to make sure I keep going up and down, never side to side. If you go off side to side, it often warps the blade and it's problematic. But it worked pretty terribly. So I'm gonna have to do a shim temper. Unfortunately, I missed the camera footage, but I got it straight, so that's all that matters. Now I'll begin finish grinding, starting off with 60 grit to get my edge down to the thickness I want. Now I start moving up the grits with 120 grit. Then the 220 grit Trizac belt. And finally finishing off with a 400 grit Trizac belt. This gives me a good finish to start hand sanding. This is a fun trick I learned for cleaning up plunges. Works surprisingly well. Now I begin hand sanding, starting off with 220 grit. I'll leave it at 220 grit for a while until I'm finished with the handle. Speaking of, this will be the handle material. It is African blackwood, super hard, super dense, super dark. This is just me plotting out where the holes are supposed to be so I don't drill them in the wrong spot. Now I start drilling, first with a shorter bit to set up the initial pilot, and then I will continue later with a longer drill bit. This is not how you're supposed to use a drill bit, but it's pretty much the only way to get rid of the web in between both the holes, so I have to cut it. because it doesn't quite fit, I have to broach and file away the rest of the material. With it fit up, I have to now cut in the V shape to fit to my bolster. Here I'm cutting some chunks away off the profile to save some time sanding. I would use my scroll saw, but the blades are dull on that, so hacksaw it is. Unfortunately, I got a little excited with the profiling and I forgot to record, but here it is after profiling. Now to final shaping. As you can see, I got some lines on there to help me keep things concentric. Then I had to tune up a few things with the file, as is natural. Typically things off the grinder aren't perfect. Now I begin sanding the handle, starting off with I think 320 grit, then I work my way all the way up to 600 grit. After sanding, I give it a quick rub with some steel wool before buffing it to give it its final shine. The handle finished, I go back to the blade, and I'll finish sanding this all the way to 600 grit. Now I etch it in the ferric chloride solution so we can see the San-Mai. Might be hard to see because it just came out, but it looks fantastic. We're on the final leg now, just gotta glue up the handle. Unfortunately, I forgot to record putting them both together, so just imagine it in your head or something. Regardless, after gluing up overnight, this one is finished. Let me know what you think in the comments.